appreciate I've got the after lunch spot on the third day of a great conference. So you'll be pleased to hear this is not a particularly technical talk. This is mostly about humans and human interactions. So hopefully not too heavy for you. So firstly, a little bit about me. I've got kind of 15, 16 years of experience in kind of monitoring and observability world, rolling out kind of various different types of tools from infrastructure monitoring, log monitoring, RUM, APM, all the alerting and stuff like that. Mostly in big banks, large enterprises, right? And one of the biggest challenges I've faced is not the actual building of the tools, right? It's about getting people to use them, to instrument their own damn code, right? And actually, use them in anger. And I've come to realize that these problems are very rarely technical, okay? They're normally very human. And the talk is called this because someone once said to me, or I came across this quote, right, that developers are very creative problem solvers. And if you look like a problem, then they'll solve you too. And this really resonated with me, right? And I've spent a lot of my career trying to make sure that the adoption of monitoring and observability tooling and things, and actually using them, doesn't look like a problem to people. And then speaking to various people in our domain at conferences and everything, I've realized that, it's not just me that's had this problem. So this talk is kind of sharing some things that I found that don't work, some things that do work, and hopefully it's of use to you. So creative problem solvers. Developers solve problems, right? And they often do it in really creative ways, right? It's kind of their job. They kind of train their brains to do so. And to be honest, it's really impressive. They face all manner of obstacles. Now, I'm not a developer, I never have been, but these are some things that I've heard developers say. So they start off with kind of business logic and stuff, and then they've got their legacy code and dependencies, depending on which language. They've got types. We're a Rust shop, so don't have that problem. And CI process and everything else like that, right? And basically, we need to make sure that on the path to production, that monitoring observability tooling and the adoption of it and using it, it's not on this list of things. It's not another thing that they try and work around. So I used to be really naive, right? I thought that if we provided a monitoring service, we told people about it, they were going to use it, right? Because why wouldn't they use it? Monitoring is great. And if they kind of instrument their code as soon as they start writing it, then they can solve their bugs really, really quickly. It's much cheaper to do so before it reaches production. This whole kind of left shift stuff and everything. And it would be great, but that's, not how it works, right? And the fact is that people will not start using things just because it exists, even if they know it exists, right? And these are some of the kind of reasons that I've come across, and it was actually quite kind of cathartic writing out these, to be honest. The fact is that there are many reasons why people might not use this stuff. Some of them kind of understandable, some of them maybe less understandable, and everything else like that. And to be honest, when I thought about it, I thought it was quite ironic that for someone who's spent their entire career in IT operations, that I kind of thought that I would build it and it would be done, because actually I know that the building it is the easy bit. It's the bit that's after it, that comes after that's actually much harder, right? And, good intentions don't actually achieve anything. So we need to help these people, because fundamentally, we can have the best monitoring observability platform in the world, but if no one's using it, then we've kind of wasted our time, effort, money, everything, right? So, the first thing to state, and it's kind of painful to say this, right, but I think a couple of people have as well. I was a little bit scared about this slide, but I think other people have mentioned it too, is that not everyone cares, right? Whilst we all here really are sold on the value of monitoring, observability, everything, and instrumenting your code, not everyone cares, and they don't see that value. And this used to make me really, really angry. Right, it just used to drive me wild that people didn't see this. Why didn't they understand it? It was going to help them so much, right? But as I've become older, calmer maybe, wiser possibly, I've begun to realise that actually it's okay. It's understandable. And actually, it's really human. We're all different, right? And it's kind of wrong of me just to expect that everyone would get it because I do, right? And they would understand it because I do. We're all different. And in actual fact, that's kind of why all of us in this room and on the live stream stuff, that's kind of why we exist, right? We are the champions in our organizations. And we do need to sell the value of what we do to our customers, because they are our customers, right? We kind of need teams to need us and use our tooling, right? Because if they're not, then we're not providing value to the organization, right? And fundamentally, for all of our tooling and all of these services, there has to be a return on investment on this stuff, right? If it was cheaper and easier for a company just to swallow that outage than it was to put in this monitoring observability, then they might actually well do that, right? And if it's hard for people who are writing the code to see the value in what we're doing, then, but we just become a control game, another obstacle, a thing to overcome, right? So we need to help people see the value. So my first kind of thoughts on this were, let's just automate all the things, right? Let's automate that pain away. Let's make it so they don't actually have to do anything, whether they like it or not, whether they know about it or not, they're going to get all the good metrics, right? We can build it into our pipelines, we can add all the auto-instrumentation, and they will get it, and it will be there, and that's the problem solved. But actually, what I quickly realized is it isn't the problem solved, right? If people don't know about it, if they don't care about it, what are they actually going to do when they go to need it, or use it, or there is an incident, right? Am I going to turn up to every incident because I know the data, because I understand what's being emitted? That's, it's not a very scalable model, right? I don't really want to be on call for everyone else's stuff because I'm the one put in their monitoring for them and they don't understand the data. So we actually need people to consciously add in the instrumentation, right? We need them to know what metrics, logs, traces, and any other data that their services are emitting. As I say, without that, we're either signing ourselves up for a lot of pain, or, again, we might as well not have bothered. So, yeah, having the best solution in the world is pointless if no one's using it, but it's also pointless if no one understands it, or anything else like that, right? So, the other idea you can do is you can kind of mandate things, right? You can force people to use it, yeah? Thou shalt, instrument your services. You must do this. Again, tried it, doesn't really work. Firstly, you kind of end up policing this stuff a lot, right? You spend a lot of your time trying to enforce these rules, and that's just not very fun, and I became angry again. Why haven't this team done this, right? They know they should do this. It's just not a very nice conversation to have with people. Going around, you need to do this, you must do this. You do not make yourself popular. I can guarantee that. So it's actually much better to have a nice, happy path that people want to take, right? Because they actually see the value. So how do we explain the value? I was speaking to a friend of mine about doing this talk and kind of explaining what I'm trying to say in this slide, and he went, oh, don't call the baby ugly. I'd never heard of that before. And incidentally, this slide is why I'm using words, not pictures, in my slides. Right, so the point is that when you have a conversation with someone, the way in which you have a conversation with someone, the tone of voice and everything else like that can drastically change the outcome of that conversation, right? And the fact is that when people are writing code and developers are doing stuff, building stuff, they take pride in their work. They care about it, right? And no one wants to be told, hey, that's great, well done, but your stuff's going to break, right? It's going to fail, so you need what I'm providing. That's not a great conversation to have. It's not a very positive conversation to have. And, humans respond better to positive conversations. And I had this epiphany many years ago when I was quite young in my career and I was speaking to this new engineering manager, very experienced, lots of knowledge and stuff, but they were quite abrupt and I was kind of a little bit scared of them. And I went up to them and said, hey, you and your team, you need monitoring, you need all this stuff because your stuff's going to break and it's going to fail at some point. So come and see me. And they just shut me down right there and said, we write good code. Why are you coming and telling me it's going to fail? Why don't you tell me you're going to show everyone how great it is? And I thought,
I don't know. I genuinely don't know. That's a great point. So since then, I've tried to change my conversation, right? I say, rather than telling your stuff is going to break, I say, hey, you do really clever things. It runs really fast, right? Let me show the world how great it is. Let me help you kind of sell how brilliant you are at writing code, right? Because the fact is that 99.99% or whatever your SLO is and stuff, that's a high number. It's a lot, right? And when you think about it, these people are doing incredibly clever things, right? They're working with lots of different technologies. Microservices are making everything more complicated. And they have crazy mental models of how all this stuff is doing. That anything works at all, to me, is a wonder, because I certainly could not do it, right? So let's celebrate them, right? Let's take monitoring, observability as a way to show how awesome these people are, okay? This also works with product as well, I found, right? If you're finding that this is getting de-scoped, if it's never actually getting done, this is a great conversation to say, well, I'd like to show the world how many users your product is getting, how many times your new feature is being used. This is a much better way to have a conversation that is more likely to end up in success. Right. It's a tough job to do anyway, right? And it's a really tough job to do if you're by yourself. So you need to make friends. As I said earlier, right, not everyone cares. However, some people really, really do care. And some people have really crazy flashbacks from that time in an incident a while ago that they didn't have data. So they might not care, but they know they need to do it, right? And these people are your friends. If someone comes up to me and says, hi, I've got this Spring Bean that I like to monitor, as I said, enterprise banks, so Java, right? I remember them, yeah? They are someone that I need to build a friendship with, a relationship with, because they can become an ally of mine in actually getting the company to have better monitoring and observability, right? I don't forget them. There are other ways to spot some of these people, right? They're often the people that are always turning up to every incident, that their colleagues look to help them debug or troubleshoot, their code and infrastructure and stuff. These people are your friends. We need to speak to them. We need to make sure they know who we are. We need to, understand their problems. We need to help them, because ultimately we do need their help to help our organization and to make sure that we're providing that return on investment that ultimately is, why we get paid and things. And one of the most important ways that we need their help, right, is we don't ever want to, if we're saying we're rolling out a new technology, a new tool, or implementing tracing for the first time or anything else like that, we do not want to, in my experience at least, just push it out there and tell everyone, go do this, it's all ready, okay? You should start small, okay? These friends of yours can be your early adopters, okay? They are going to help you iron out the issues that they have, right? You're going to hold their hands at the beginning, right? You're going to jump on incidents with them and help them use tracing for the first time. You're going to sit in on those post-incident, analysis sessions. You're going to give them a really curated experience, right? You're going to build out the good use cases for the tools that you're doing, right? And you're generally going to remove friction in adoption, right? Regularly meet these people, bring them all together as well, right? Because I can guarantee that you will not have thought of everything. And the feedback that they're going to give you is invaluable. And they're engaged, right? These are people that care about it too. And the fact is that if they're struggling with something, if they don't like something, then you can guarantee that other people will feel that too. And one of the key things here is it's all about trust. Trust is a really important commodity, right? And it takes a long time to gain it, but it's very, very easily lost. These people that are engaged, you do have a bit more leeway with them. You can work with them to do this stuff, to end up with a good experience, because it probably won't be right at the beginning. But if you just send this stuff out and other people who are not so engaged are kind of finding out these issues, you know what? They're going to take one look, say, no, it's no good, and walk away. They've lost trust, and it's really, really hard to gain it back once you've lost it. Building a happy path, right? So it's impossible to account for every possibility. And as I said before, you can't mandate stuff, right? You can't provide one standard that everyone must follow and push it out there. That doesn't work. But some level of standardization is a good thing. So thinking about kind of common technologies, deployment methods, and everything, build around these, work with your early adopters to build a great experience, right? Make it easy for people to do the right thing. Lowering the barrier of entry, right, as some might call it. Things like access are really easy gotchas. So the amount of times that I've been speaking to people and said, oh, you can do this, and they say, oh, I don't have access to that tool. But we've given the entire company access. So I will sit down with them there and then, right? And work with them to log them on so that they know how to. That's a really easy thing to overcome. And if you're worried about kind of privileges and stuff, give everyone read-only access. So at least they can log on, they can look at the data. As we had a talk, as we were building out our tools in my last team, we kind of generally had a rule, a kind of motto that if you did it 10 times, then you should have automated it, right? So when we're thinking about onboarding teams and everything else like that, if it looked like we were going to do it 10 times, then you automate it. You put it into the happy path. And I like to think about the 80-20 rule here, right? 80% of the teams, the people that that are using our services, should be able to use them in a completely self-sufficient way, right? And by doing that, by achieving that goal, by reaching that position, we can actually spend the time that we have with the 20%, the people who have the niche problems, the people who genuinely need our help, who have interesting stuff to do that doesn't fit in our happy path. And the other thing about this kind of happy path is it changes, right? It's not a static thing. You can't build this one pipeline, forget about it, and push everyone onto it. Because, technologies change. What we're using now is different to 5 years ago, and everything else like that, right? And then there are, patches and vulnerability updates and all that other stuff, right? You do have to keep investing in this happy path. But it's worth it, right? Part of making things self-service is documentation, right? And I went to the last EU version of Monitorama, I think in 2018, maybe, in Amsterdam. And I was at one of the after conference things, having a drink and a joke with someone. We were talking about the quality of documentation amongst most tools. And we kind of agreed that mostly it's crap. But then I started thinking about the documentation that my team provided and I provided for all of our internal customers, because again, they're our customers, right? And I kind of thought about it and realized actually our documentation wasn't that great either. So I joked with that person that we should have documentation week. And I kind of went back to my team and everything, and we joked about kind of having documentation week and haha, very funny, Ivan, and everything else like that. Until one Monday I came in after having a few experiences of things that probably we should have documented and said, right people, it's documentation week. And they said, haha, very funny, Ivan. And I said, no, seriously, it's actually documentation week. And I'm not going to lie, they were not overly enthusiastic about it. And looking back, I do kind of feel that I think I'd been given some really horrible bureaucratic tasks that you often get in large enterprises. And this was kind of my retribution and on my team. But, that's, yeah. Anyway, right. The point is that documentation is stupidly important, right? How to get started, how to do common operations and things, and answers to most common questions. When we talk about trust, right? If you can show that you've invested time, that your documentation is great, that you've thought of these things, that you're trying to help these people, this is one way that you can actually gain trust amongst your customers. Train everyone. So we invested in my last team a lot of time in training. A lot of time in training, right? We had 101 sessions every month for all of our tools, kind of 4 or 5 tools or so, right? And we advertise these everywhere to engineers, to their managers, to whoever would listen, right? And it was kind of, for each tool, it was a 2-hour session that covered what each tool was, why you needed it, blah, 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 right? And we were starting to move on to the 201 sessions when I left, right? The point here is not to make everyone an expert. You are not going to make everyone an expert in 2 hours, right? It's to make them familiar, to make them curious, right? Learning new things is hard, and it can be scary. And the fact is that, you know, in our domain, traces are really complicated to read, to understand. If I write a PromQL query and it comes out what looks like right the first time, I'm more suspicious than I am happy, right? And I work in this domain. What we do is hard, right? And when you're trying to do this, right, what happens is that this can lead to people not bothering at all, right? If they don't understand it, if they're not given help, they get frustrated and they revert back to what they've always done before because they know how to do that, even if it's provably worse, right? Quick example, kind of log aggregation, getting a log tool that, you know, we can ship all these logs to. We rolled it out, but lots of people were still logging onto the boxes themselves because they knew how to do that. They were scared of that tool, right? That's human, right? So we have to work with these people, right? Some people are scared of change. Change can be scary, so we need to help these people, right? Take their first baby steps. Ease them in. Is it a lot of effort? Yeah. It's a massive amount of time. You know, creating the training, right? Actually providing the training sessions, advertising these all, and everything else like that. It's a huge amount of effort. But is it worth it? Absolutely. Provide a safe space for questions, right? And as I said, learning new things can be scary. And people will have a lot of questions. Some of these will be really, really good questions. Some of these will be not so good questions. Some of them will be the same question over and over and over and over and over, right? Your chat tool of choice, Slack for my last team, is a really important place to drive everyone to. One of the most important messages that we would give on our training session is, this is our Slack channel. Use it. Ask us questions. We will answer you, right? And, I'm sure I don't have to say this to you all, but, treat everyone with respect, right? Answer their questions. Answer them in a timely fashion, right? And then with each question that you answer, ask yourself, could this go into our documentation? Could we actually add this to our happy path and automate it away? When we became known as a helpful team, right, people who maybe otherwise would have given up started asking us questions, right? And then actually, when we answered their questions and stuff, then they would tell their colleagues, hey, this team are pretty helpful. They will answer your questions, right? And that's what you want. When I left the monitoring team of all of the Slack channels across the entire engineering things, we had more engineers in our channel. We had much more active conversation. We had engineers from one team answering questions from engineers of another team. Nothing to do with us. I'm immensely proud of that, right? It took a lot of time and effort and a lot of treating these people with respect and a lot of, as I said, answering questions, no matter how silly, over and over. But we got there, and it was so powerful. One point to mention, right? If you do get asked questions that are in your documentation, point people to the documentation. Don't answer it there. You want these people to become self-sufficient, to help them build up that behavior. The other thing to be clear about is be honest. If stuff is failing, or if they've come across something that's not so good, admit it, point it out, say, yeah, that's not so good, right? This is your main point of interaction with people, right? And, you can't fake, authenticity. It's also a really good place to kind of advertise your training, tell people your all the improvements that you've done. And also, if you are doing documentation week, then, you can let people know that you're a bit busy and you might be a little bit slower because you're all having great fun writing documentation. Never forget, these are your customers, right? And if I can give you one takeaway from this, it's these are your customers. right? So you need them, kind of more than they need you. So please bear that in mind. So that's kind of it. Like, one last thing to do, right? So this is an open source project. It's kind of a micro framework that does auto instrumentation, and it's something that I've been involved in, and there's at least one other person here who's been involved in it. And actually this helps with quite a few of the problems that I've been talking about, kind of developer-first observability and helping them understand the value of it. It's super cool. So yeah, please do have a look at this if you are coming across some of the problems that I spoke about today. And with that, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivan. That was great. We got a few minutes for some questions, so do we have any questions from the audience? Hey, you're just straight up food coma below down. Oh, here we go.
I'm curious how you, in listing all the different ways you're trying to do something and people object, one of the ones I've run into a few times is where the tool they have actually is legitimately good enough for them, but there's a business reason, like coming from above, where we're like, when you don't really, you can't make a compelling argument that it's better, it's good enough already, right?
Yeah, how do you convince that you need the better thing?
Yeah, it's a really hard conversation, and I've been on both sides of it, being the person to kind of say, sorry, we're taking that away from you, and being in the conversation to say, you know, like, actually, you know, I'm using this, why are you taking this away from me? And again, I don't have any great answers, right? Because, you know, like, people do, you know, you have to understand again, like, these are people, and they do build up affinity for these things, and that change is going to be scary. So the best thing I can say is, you know, be kind, be caring, right? Appreciate them and understand the fact, and, you know, kind of essentially say sorry. You know, I don't have any good, you know, better answers than that, I'm afraid.